All right, I'm going to go ahead and get the live stream started now, says Daniel. It's trying to load, and then I'll go ahead and get the recording started also. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Library Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearings. To the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, excuse me. We have our workshop today that's called our Library Lunch and Learn. So today is our Library Lunch and Learn series. Today we're going to be talking about 504 plans and what parents need to know. Today, our presenter that we have with us here today is Lanna Wolosin. Lanna will go ahead and introduce herself here briefly, and after that, then we'll move forward with the presentation. If anyone here in the audience has any questions or comments, please go ahead and put those in the chat, and we will go ahead and answer those when we are able. Alrighty, so I just want to make sure everything's set on my end. So I will hand it over to Lanna. The floor is
All
yours.
right.
And so I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm, like Daniel said, I'm here to share with you about Section 504, kind of what parents need to know, just so that if you are looking for a 504 for your child, or if there's any teachers that are looking for information about their students, that you will just have some understanding. A little bit about me. So I'm a parent. I have two children. Troy just graduated from UT of Knoxville, and Lindley is going to Tennessee Tech for nursing. And both my children have been very involved in the deaf community, just growing up in my career and my activities and my volunteer work. I'm also a wife. Some of you do know my husband, Tommy. He was a longtime volunteer at Bridges in the youth program. And so my family is very invested in the deaf community. I'm also a family member. I have people in my family who have hearing loss. I started out um, my, I guess that kind of started my interest in hearing loss and to learn more about it and how to help them. But then I met a deaf friend in high school, and her family was deaf and they taught me sign. And after that, I realized I wanted to have a career working with people that were deaf and hard of hearing. And the best way to do that was to learn the language. So I went to school to be an interpreter, and then continued on. I was the youth director at Bridges for a few years when I moved down here to Tennessee, and then became a teacher for the deaf and hard of hearing. And also, this is a new thing. Some people know this about me, some people don't. I am hard of hearing. I had a different experience than my friends and my students. I had a sudden hearing loss. And so that affects me in different ways. And I feel like that's given me more knowledge and understanding to further help my students. In their educational journey. And, hearing loss in general has, it's a spectrum. It's not just one thing. And so I just wanted to share some of those things about me with you. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the agenda. So I'm kind of going to go through what is Section 504, who qualifies for a 504 plan, what is the 504 meeting process, what is in a 504 plan, a 504 plan in post-secondary education, and then I'm going to talk about handouts, answer any questions or if there's any discussion. So what is Section 504? So this is kind of just like a general definition and some facts. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities. The federal law ensures that students with a disability has equal access to an education, and that includes school activities alongside their peers in the general education setting, and it does not require special instruction typically. So all public schools, including post-secondary educational institutions, related programs that receive federal funds must follow this law. It also requires providing accessibility like captioning, accommodations, interpreters in public facilities and governmental services. It applies to people with disabilities who are eligible for employment and with reasonable accommodations can perform the functions of the job. So it does go into the workplace after your children or students graduate from high school. So this is important because students are entitled to a free and appropriate public education, which is abbreviated FAPE. It's provided through regular or special education services that meet the needs of students who have disabilities as adequately as students without disabilities. FAPE is based on following procedures that they have set specific requirements related to things like the educational setting, evaluation and placement, and procedural safeguards, which are your rights as a parent. So LEAs, which is your school system, must provide FAPE to each qualified disabled or impaired person in their jurisdiction and must be provided without cost to parents. So when we talk about who qualifies for a 504 plan, so it's defined as students who need or are thought to need special education or related services because of a disability, and they can be referred for a Section 504 plan. That can be by parents, by teachers, administrators, or other school staff. And the students or your children that have a physical or mental impairment, a medical diagnosis is not always required, nor does a medical diagnosis automatically qualify someone. And the disability is stated as an impairment that must substantially limit one or more major life activities. So that would be learning, hearing, concentrating, seeing, walking, things like that. There's a lot longer list than that. And then today we're kind of going to focus more on the hearing piece of it so that parents are prepared when they're in this situation. So I'm going to go over a little bit about the 504 meeting process. So this is something that I'm involved with in my school system. And I'm just going to go over kind of what you would expect and kind of the flow of the meeting to have a better understanding. So I would notify the school in writing, like in an email, that you would like to discuss a 504 plan for your child's hearing loss. You could go up to the school as well, but I would still kind of send something in writing just so you have that documentation. And then in my school system, the school counselor is the one that kind of oversees the 504s. So I'm not sure about if that's the same in other counties, but you would need to find out who that person is in your school system. So you should receive, once you get, let them know about your concerns, want to have a meeting set, you should get a meeting invitation, email, mail, and you sign that you're consenting to have the meeting. And so there's several team members that are involved. So like I said, for my system, it's the school counselor and then parent or guardian, um, teachers, the teacher for the deaf, or some systems don't have a teacher for the deaf. Maybe they contract with an audiologist. It depends. And then a school administrator like the principal or the assistant principal. There can also be other um, team members, if possibly a school psychologist, other related service providers. So related service providers are can be speech, OT, PT, uh, audiologist. If there's anybody else that knows your child, they could also attend the meeting. And then you would be informed of your rights, which is the safeguard. So 504 does have rights, parent rights, that you should receive a copy of, and you'd sign that you received a copy of that. Then, oh, they would also like introduce everybody, would be part of the 504 meeting process as well. And then you would get into the data. So what medical information you have, if your child has a hearing loss, you would probably have an audiogram, some audiology reports, things like that. If there's anything else that you would need, or that you think was important, you could present that as well. Um, they will ask you to tell them about your child. And then we have teacher input. Also, that could include, if you're talking about a child that's going to be 3 years old, you might have information from TEIS, or if they're at a daycare, you might have information from them. That would be the teacher. You would have teachers at the school that they're going to in the meeting. So they might not know your child yet, so they might not have any input. But for older students, you would have their classroom teacher information. You would have academic performance, like grades and things like that. Progress monitoring. So if your school system uses like iReady or Ames Web or um, Star 360, there's several programs and they change a lot, but some kind of progress monitoring for their reading and math. If there's any behavior concerns, we'll talk about attendance, and then any social emotional needs. So and that's not limited to just those things, but just any information that would help the school better serve your child and meet their needs. And sometimes you might not have any data at that first meeting. They might need to gather data. They might need to find out some more information. Um, Specifically, as an example, maybe your child has some chronic ear infections that may or may not be resolved. You could still request a 504 for that until you know that that medical situation is resolved and they don't have any more ear infections. So um, it's all individualized, so it depends on, your specific situation and what you need. So also during this meeting, so like I said, the parent would discuss about the hearing loss. Then myself as the TOD, I would talk about what I see in the report. Um, and then if there was an audiologist, they could also discuss the hearing loss information as well. And the biggest thing is that the team decides if they're eligible. It's always a team decision. It's not just one person saying yes or no. So, and you're a part of the team, so it's it's truly a team decision. And typically, you don't make any changes unless the team is there to make a decision. So, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So then you would create the service plan. And that is a document with different sections like environment, if they needed all different accommodations in different sections, you would list those things in every section, and I'm going to get into that in more detail as well. But then you would talk about those accommodations and possible services that they may need. So once you've done that, everyone would sign the document stating that they know the student, they agree with the plan, and when the student is in school, all the teachers would be given a copy of that and required to sign it that they, acknowledge it and understand what they're supposed to do as far as the accommodations and any supports. And then you would meet every year for a 504, and then every 3 years, it's reviewed to see if they're eligible unless something changes earlier. So you can call a meeting anytime. If you are halfway in the school year and you feel like some things need to change, they need to be removed or added, you can ask for a meeting then. You don't have to wait a full year. The same thing for the eligibility when I talked about the child that has chronic ear infections and needed some support. Maybe they had tubes, maybe that is situation is resolved, and then they don't need the 504 plan anymore. So you would come back and let the school know what's going on and see what steps need to be taken. A little bit so I talked about kind of like the process and the flow of how the meeting goes. And this is some more specific things of what's in the plan. So, the 504 is about accessibility and accommodations, and the accommodations would change how the student accesses their learning or the environment. So this can be with things like assistive technology. So HAT, which is hearing assistive technology, like if they would need a classroom speaker or if they would need the teacher to wear a remote microphone that would wirelessly go to their ear level devices so that they could hear what the teacher is saying from across the room. It also lists the name of the person responsible for making sure that the 504 plan is put into action. So typically, like I said, for me, it's the school counselor, but I'm responsible for the hearing related pieces. So like the equipment, things like ensuring the captioning is being used and the teachers know how to use it and things like that. So I would be responsible for those things. And then if there were other services that needed to be done, there'd be somebody listed as responsible for those. So some less common things that you would see in a 504 is any kind of related service that the school would provide, or modifications which change what the student is expected to learn to know. So for me, if a student needed to have information modified, then I would be looking at more an IEP for that because the 504 is geared more for accessibility and those accommodations to access the information, not needing help processing and understanding the information. And so I do have a lot of students on a 504 that I will just check in with the teacher every year, make sure things are set, make sure things are good. They all have my contact information to let me know if anything's, going wrong or if anything changes. And I attend those meetings. I do have a couple students that I provide a little bit more for. And as a parent, you can request some of those things. So I do have a student that I just meet with um, every month to check in, see how things are going. We work on some self-advocacy things because as they get older, there's more and more things that they will be responsible for, and they need to know about their hearing loss and their devices and how to advocate for themselves. So I do that. Um, then to talk a little bit more about the accommodations. So this is kind of what I feel like is the big piece of the 504. Um, So this is, all grades. And I'm very, um, I believe strongly in writing custom accommodations. So you want to be specific, and write custom accommodations. So, because if you just write preferential seating, what does that mean? It means something different for everybody. So, for me, writing preferential seating, um, doesn't explain what actually needs to happen. So if your child has, let's say, a unilateral hearing loss, and um, so that if they don't hear on their left side, but and they have full access on their right side, you would want to make sure that that right ear is positioned and they're seating in a spot where they can have access to all the information that's going on and they can see everything as well. So in a situation like that, I would kind of figure out what the room configuration is, because in especially elementary school, you can have a lot of interesting room setups with like little pods, four desks together, U-shaped. I mean, all sorts of things. And so you want to know kind of what their classroom setup is. And so typically I try to put them in the front left corner of the room so that when they're sitting and looking at the board, they can turn and they can see all the students. They can have access on their on that with their right ear so that they can hear and have access as much as possible. Um, you would never want the reverse, because then they would not be hearing well in the classroom. And so don't be afraid to ask for specific, um, and really write out those accommodations. Another one is the hearing assistive technology. So that would be like a classroom system where there's a speaker and the teacher is wearing a microphone, and it is amplifying her voice and the whole class can hear it. Another type of hat is the ear level pieces. So the teacher wears a microphone, but it wirelessly transmits right to the student's cochlear implant or hearing aid. And there's also some other systems that are smaller, um, similar to a classroom speaker. So it all depends on what your child needs. And then we have captioning. So captioning um, is important to make sure that the teacher knows how to set up the captioning, if they watch any videos, if they show any clips. Um, Nowadays, especially as they get older, they're doing a lot of activities on their Chromebooks or on a computer. And so even the progress monitoring, like the Ames Web and iReady and things like that, there's going to be there's a lot of talking on there, and listening from a computer when you don't see the face is a challenge for students with hearing loss. So that's something to consider, making sure that the teacher and then ultimately the student knows how to turn those features on. Um, and then you'll also see something called oral presentation, which is read aloud services. So if a student has difficulty reading and they need the information read to them, you'll see that you can ask for a human reader for that instead of listening from a computer. Because with all the technology we have these days, there's a lot of, speech to text and vice versa. And um, listening from a computer, again, is not always the best choice. Some students are okay with it, but some are not. And so again, they might need to have a human reader read that to them. And what I have done in certain situations is if there's activity or testing going on that's on a computer, you are allowed to have that read verbatim with with the human reader, and you cannot read things that are not read, that are not spoken to them. But so sometimes that causes some confusion, but you can repeat with a human voice what the computer was telling them so that they can have the best access there. And then there's also note-taking assistance. So note-taking could be printed notes, digital notes, fill in the blank notes. There's all kinds of options there. Uh, Typically, you see that more in middle school and high school, maybe fourth and fifth grade. Sometimes in the younger grade, it's not really necessary. But also with all the technology and a lot of activities and work is being done on the Chromebooks. A lot of times students will have like access to their teacher's PowerPoint or access to the notes. Some students don't do as well with having notes on the screen. They would do better with having a printed copy of notes, so you can request that. Um, I have specifically with my high school students, some of them have requested more of those fill in the blank notes where they want to see the printed notes, but they like to have some involvement and be active in the lesson by taking notes, having something to take down so they can write a few words here or there to kind of go along with what the teacher is saying. That's an option. Another option related to that is like highlighting. So if the teacher gives them printed copies, the student can kind of highlight some of those important things as they go along. And the note taking is also very important with students that use interpreters. So it's might not be impossible, but it's very difficult to watch an interpreter, look at the teacher, write notes all at the same time. There are some students that like to take some of their own notes, and that's their choice. But um, that is a difficult skill to do that all at the same time. And we want to make sure that they're getting all the information in their class. And then extended time for classwork and testing. So extended time um, also has a lot of variations. When you use extended time in a 504, you're going to put down specifically how much extended time they're going to get. You wouldn't just write extended time because that leaves it very wide open. Um, when you do extended time, it should be for classwork and for testing and for standardized testing. So sometimes, for example, students um, maybe they don't feel like they need extended time for their classwork or for taking tests, but then when they think about taking large tests like the TCAP or ACT testing, they feel like they need extended time. Um, that is something that really needs to be documented ahead of time. And if you're wanting, you know, extended time for those larger tests, you need to have the extended time also during your regular school day for the tests. Um, because when you have a 504 or an IEP for that matter, and you have extended time for your tests and you want it for ACT, ACT is going to look at your IEP or 504 document and see what accommodations you've had regularly every day throughout your school career. And if you don't have extended testing as a accommodation, they're not going to give it to you for ACT testing. It's kind of typically how it works. Um, and so if it's something that you need to go ahead and use it every day in the classroom. And the extended time can work like this. If there's for specifically for like TCAP and 10 Ready and those sorts of things, um, you would have maybe, let's say, 30 minutes to do an English section. Then you can do time and a half, which would give you 45 minutes. And so you just kind of can play with that. You can do double time. You just, it's the teachers kind of just assess how long it takes them to do a test normally, um, and kind of go from there to see how much time that they would need. And you don't have to do extended time for every single subject. Maybe math is on grade level and they're doing well with math and they're comfortable with math, then you don't need to have extended time for math, but you want it for reading and ELA. If you need it for reading and ELA, typically you're probably going to want it for social studies because social studies and history has a lot of reading. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then for just regular testing in the classroom, same thing. You can just specify how much additional time you would want them to have for testing. And also for the testing, whether or not you want them to test in a small group or you want them to test with the whole class. And for classwork, typically we would do something like maybe they would get an extra day to complete classwork. Um, but again, you kind of want to have a time frame put on that and not just leave it open-ended. And then there's also things like just accessibility support, just other things you could think of if they're playing sports, maybe they need to use their microphone there. So you would want to list that. Um, it all depends on your child's activities and what they're involved with, because they can also, participate in clubs and there's students that participate in a lot of after-school activities and they can get um, accommodations and support during those times as well. And then the other thing I put down here was behavior supports or any kind of check-in. So if there's any kind of behavior concerns or check-ins that may need to happen, that can be on there too. So it's not limited to these things. These are just some of the things that I typically see um, and use when I'm doing a 504. And then how this kind of relates to post-secondary education, and then the workforce. So the high school and parents and the students should all work together to prepare to make sure that your child can self-advocate for their needs when they go, when they graduate high school and go to work or go to post-secondary education. They need to understand their disability and their documents and things and what to say and how to say, and I work with students on those things. One thing you can do is bring your high school 504 as a guide to your college or university or program that you plan to attend. Because when you apply to college, they have no knowledge that your child had a 504 or an IEP. It's up to the student's responsibility to go to it's like usually called Student Services Center. They have various names, but you have to go to that center and register with them that you need accommodations. And you can, like I said, you can use your IEP or your 504 as a guide to kind of show them what you had and what services and supports were there to help you be successful. And so the other big thing about this is that parents are not privileged to certain things due to FERPA because your child is 18 now. And so you can't go into the college office by yourself and request things for your child. They have to go do that themselves. Now you can go with them, but I've been through this with my children already. And it's a little different because you don't have access to their information or their grades or and it's a transition for sure. And then let's see. So, and then those schools, their colleges and universities will be focused on reasonable accommodations for access, like the things we talked about, note takers, preferential seating, had, assistive devices, things like that. They're not there for academic success. And the documentation that they require can differ, but most are going to require an audiogram that's less than a year old, is what some of my students have experienced so far. And also with VR services, they can also support your child in post-secondary endeavors. You can contact them and set something up when they're in high school. I help my students connect to VR services their senior year, but they can start earlier than that. But they can help out with different things and in different ways, financially and other ways. So they typically require an audiogram within a year as well. So that's something to keep in mind. So that I have some handouts I'm going to share that talk a little bit more about, I, there you go. So I have a couple handouts for you. I'm not going to show you all of them, but I have a couple handouts that I will figure out with Daniel and Beth how to get them to you. But these are some really nice guides and that you can take with to these meetings. You can go talk about it with your child and see what things they may need. So let's see. So, it's got amplification options, assistive devices, different type of communication accommodations, physical environment accommodations, instructional accommodations. Um, some of these are modifications, which we talked about, would be more appropriate for an IEP, and just some other things to consider. So this is one of the sheets that I'm going to make sure that you have access to. And then here's another one that I really like to use. Um, and it's kind of has the same thing. So it kind of has a lot of things on here that, maybe you wouldn't initially think about, other people, team members wouldn't think about, but I think it's a really nice summary of a variety of accommodations and things that could be needed. I also have a handout. It's several pages long, about extracurricular activities and sports. So things to think about there. Um, and I have some documents that kind of list out all a variety of disabilities and things to think about for accessibility purposes as well. So I know that was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any questions that we have from the audience that we have for Lana today? If you have any questions, feel free to turn your camera on and I can spotlight you to get you up on the screen. Or if you prefer to leave a comment in the chat, that's totally acceptable as well. But now is the moment to ask any questions that Lana can answer and just, yeah, whatever you guys are comfortable with. Okay. I do have a question for you, Lana. Um, what are some common misconceptions that folks have about Section 504?
Um, well, sometimes I think that the focus is really a lot more on having an IEP, maybe instead of some students could benefit from a 504. I know there's going to be another presentation about IEPs in August, I think it is. with Miss Katie. And so I think that the 504, is designed to ensure that you have accessibility and you get accommodations. And it can be short term. It doesn't have to mean you get on a 504 and you stay on a 504. Or sometimes maybe people just think, oh, well, let's just try to do this and this, but it's not documented. And I really feel like, especially with a hearing loss, um, and something that's a permanent hearing loss, I would want for my own child to make sure that it was documented and that people could access that. Um, and then let me think about what else. The other thing is I talked a little bit about, so a lot of times we have students, especially when, if they're coming from TEIS services and they're doing transitioning into preschool at 3. Um, Typically, we're looking at an IEP, um, and then let's say they, have their IEP through elementary school, middle school. In middle school, students sometimes get more embarrassed of their devices, get embarrassed of getting services, and there's a lot more social emotional things that go on as they get a little bit older, and you got to work through that with them. That's where someone like me is important that can, talk with them about those things. And then, as they get through high school, and I mean, the the purpose of an IEP ultimately is that we give students support and services that they need early on and give them those skills and they grow and develop. And maybe when they get to high school, maybe they don't need the IEP anymore and they could transition to a 504 if they're not getting pulled out for services, if they don't need help with their math and their reading and things like that. And they don't need someone to, give them specialized instruction, but they definitely need the access and the accommodations, then you can consider switching them to a 504 and not think that they're not getting any services or they're not getting support. Um, then, the main difference between the 504 and the IEP is that specialized instruction with IDEA. Um, and so I have a lot of students that, in high school, they're doing really well. They're like, I don't really want to be pulled out. I don't really, I don't, I'm doing good. Their grades are good. Their tests are good. Things are going well. I think it's okay to um, see about making a change to a 504 and not to be scared of it, I guess. Um, and then also that piece, I feel like helps them having that 504 in place also helps them as they transition to college because like I said, the college has no knowledge of you having a 504 and IEP. You can take the IEP with them and present that to them, or you can take the 504. But since kind of after graduating from school, they're going to be kind of under that 504 umbrella, then I think it's important for them to know about what a 504 is and for parents to understand what a 504 is moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. So thank you so much for that. Is there any other questions that we have? I do have two more questions that I wanted to ask, but I wanted to give a chance for others to ask their questions before I hop in and ask my own questions. Okay, well, I'll go ahead with my other questions. So I'm curious about what advice that you might have for parents, parents who feel like, a little bit uninformed about the 504 process.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that some of these documents that I can provide will just give a little bit more peace of mind and a little bit of like, you know, understanding. Parents can always reach out to me if they have any kind of question, honestly. There's a lot of information online with some organizations. There's different groups like Family Voices of Tennessee and the Peers Program. They provide support. There's services, there's the services with the Tennessee School for the Deaf. I know I'm missing several groups, but there's a lot of groups. Is it STEP? I think STEP is a group, I think. So there's definitely some organizations that do provide support. There's Hands and Voices as well. So there's definitely groups that we can reach out to. And I feel like in our area, like especially Middle Tennessee, we have a lot of professionals and a lot of organizations and supports for parents that they can reach out to. And I know the library services has a lot of support as well.
Yeah. Okay. My last question that I have for you is, how could parents teach their kiddos to learn how to advocate for themselves? The reason why I ask is, I know that there's many high schoolers that feel very disempowered, very awkward. So
Mhm.
how could they advocate for themselves? I remember that there was one hard of hearing person that came up to me and they were saying that they didn't know that their university and college even um
Cart
Cart, thank you
services.
so much.
Yeah.
Even had cart
Yeah.
services or captioning services. They didn't even know that. So telling
Yeah.
them about that was really interesting that they were able to learn that. So there's a lot of information that's just missed,
Yeah.
and so a lot of folks don't even know the accommodations that universities and colleges can even
Right.
provide. It's really
Yeah.
interesting.
And I mean, I think that just goes back to awareness and trying to get this type of information out, trying to make it accessible. Um, I've been in, I've been at Wilson County for 20 years, so I have really good relationships. I have a lot of things set up and I really do get this information out to the students, but I realize in other places like rural areas, more remote places, just smaller counties and things like that, where you might have one student, they're just not going to know. And again, I think that Family Voices and Peers program does a good job with that. And like the Tennessee School for the Deaf, they have the outreach program and just trying to get information out to parents and also, um, you some schools won't have an audiologist. Most schools don't have an audiologist. Most districts don't have a teacher for the deaf, but you can always ask for a contract. You can always ask, can somebody come twice a year? You're not asking for something daily, but even twice a year. Can we have this person come? Can we contract with somebody to, twice a year, beginning of the year to come out and educate the teachers or educate the staff? And just don't be afraid to ask for different things. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I have, I mean, I have a lot of tools, obviously, as a teacher. I have a lot of worksheets, I have guides, I have things like that I'm happy to share. There's really a lot of good resources out there. And I have something that I purchased from some colleagues in Illinois that's it's 12 years. It's, well, 13, kindergarten through 12th grade. And it's kind of like a guide that shows all these skills and things that students should know every single year. So, it gets more challenging as they get older. Um, and then also there's a couple organizations. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I can see it. I can see the cover of it, but I can't think of the name of it. It's optimizing um, outcomes, I think. I forget the name, but there's another guide that kind of talks about all the things, like through the whole span, through the whole school career. And I can get you some of those documents as well. But it is very hard to know, and it's isolating, and um, it's just hard getting information out there to everybody all the time. So I know that that's frustrating, but I'm hoping even some of those guides will just spur some, oh, I didn't really think I could have that service, or I didn't really think that was possible. So it's really about getting to know like your child's specific needs, talking with their teacher, if especially if they don't have a TOD, is talking with them to figure out like what things they really need help with, what specific things they need help with, and kind of go from there. Everybody doesn't need A, B, and C. They might need X, Y, and Z. It's really individualized. And so I think that's the important is getting to know the student, the child, and what they need. And it's going to change over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is really, truly just a process. Definitely. Okay. Well, this is our last chance for any last minute questions before we go ahead and wrap up.
I think somebody asked about any changes, anything. I'm not really aware. I'm not aware of any changes um, with Section 504. Um, I think it's more like each kind of school system is going to do things a little differently, and you need to find out what those processes are in your school system.
Yeah, that's a great question, Brenda. That was a really good question. All righty. Well, I am gonna go ahead and send out a poll for our audience members. Please go ahead and fill that out. And then once that's done, we'll make some closing announcements. Lana, I just wanted to thank you so much for your presentation about Section 504. This information is incredibly pertinent for parents, professionals, families, and others in the field. It's important for us to know about this information. So thank you so much for coming today and presenting for us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and send out the poll now. Okay, so I'm just going to give a few minutes to let people go ahead and answer that. All right, so I'm going to let people go ahead and still answer if they need to, but I want to move forward with announcements. So for next month's Libraries Lunch and Learn, it's going to be on July 15th, and the topic of that one is called hearing loss and cognition. The presenter for that is going to be Dr. Nathan, last name, oh, sorry, the interpreter missed the last name and I can't get Daniel's attention. They're also the director of Eastern Virginia Medical School. And so our presenter will talk a little bit more just about hearing loss, speech and understanding, as well as cognition. And they'll talk about how folks have different levels of understandings and how each person communicates differently. And here's the flyer that we have for that. That's Dr. Nathan there. And if you go ahead on our website, you can see our flyer that we have. That's posted on our banner. And then we'll also send out a Zoom link registration the day of that you can go ahead and click on so that way you're able to join or the lunch and learn and be involved in the presentation. We will have captioning and also interpretation services provided, as always, that we do for all of our library lunch and learns. Please feel free to share this information with anyone in your local community. We want everyone to join. There's also another announcement that we have here about the visual story time. So we have a virtual story time in ASL. So we have somebody who reads a book and then we also sign it. That's going to be on July 8th at 10. It's going to be 10 to 10:30 in the morning, and that is in Central Time. So this is going to be a really great event for those who really struggle to come in person. We understand, downtown traffic. Some folks live far from the downtown library branch. So this is a great way for you guys to be involved with us and see just a signed story. There's also another announcement that I wanted to share. On July 14th, we're going to be going to the Bordeaux branch. So at the Bordeaux branch, there is going to be a story time, and we will be there signing the story as well. So we will share more information about that here soon. So keep your eyes out for that. We'll post it on our website as well as our social media on Instagram and Facebook. So go ahead and just keep an eye out for that event. All righty. Well, again, my name is Daniel, and I am here with Library Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I am a white man. I'm wearing a black shirt, and I'm here in an office. My background is blurred out. It's a blurred out gray background, and I'm also wearing black rim glasses. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming here today, and hopefully we'll see you guys at our next event. So again, thank you so much, Lana, for your time and for your presentation. And thank you so much for our interpreter here today. All right, well, we are going to go ahead and end the poll and stop recording.